Alright guys, so I'm really excited to finally begin this video to you. This is a very important topic when it comes to, going about the process, or maybe, after you've already launched your call center company. And that is, of course, choosing the right phone system software, right? Having the right phone system from a tech standpoint is the lifeblood of your business. You're accepting calls on behalf of all of your clients, and so you need the best tool to do that. Now, there's a lot of considerations that go into choosing the right tool, and I can tell you right now, if you don't get it right, it can make or break your business, and there is no exaggeration about that. So there's three main considerations that I really take into account that I've learned over the years in actually using 5 or 6 different systems, actually 6 different vendors over the course of 5 years, and literally going through like demos and second demos and testing on over 50 different providers over the past 5 years, as well as we've grown our companies and as we've learned more and realized what our needs were for our business model. And so the first thing that really comes into play is that reliability is key, right? Obviously, in the virtual receptionist space, what we're doing is we're trying to replace or emulate the in-house receptionist that a small business might have. And so in order to do that, think about a small office, right? If someone's there, on the phone rings, they pick it up every single time, right? If they're at all reliable. And so having a small business that's only getting 10 to 20, maybe 30 calls a day, every single call matters that much more. Every call could be a potential client, what have you. And so if you don't have the reliability and you're missing, even 10 or 15% of calls, it can have a significant impact on your client. It could have a significant impact on their business. And so it's not something you want to take lightly at all. And so when you're thinking about reliability, the largest thing that determines the reliability of a random software vendor in the contact center space is what technology stack are they sitting on top of. Now, there's a lot of different things out there, but the main ones you're going to come across are going to be Twilio or something that's sitting basically directly on their own, not shared servers. Okay. Now, Twilio as a technology is the equivalent of, say, Stripe, if you're familiar with online payments, or maybe Square when it comes to offline, brick and mortar payments, or maybe Shopify for like online e-commerce. Basically, they are technologies that have existed for decades now, right? And there's archaic options that honestly are sort of limiting at this point, especially in the call center space. And so Twilio, like these other, new solutions, have brought tools for these industries into the 21st century. It enables someone to build cloud-based, telecom system very quickly and in a beautiful way. And Twilio sits on top of what's called AWS or Amazon Web Services. And that sounds like a fantastic thing until you actually use a phone system that is, powered by Twilio. And, it's not to say anything wrong about Twilio itself. Twilio is a, very robust advanced code, and for things such as text messaging, anything outside of the high level of reliability we need in voice in the virtual receptionist space. Anything outside of that, I would say Twilio fantastic. However, again, we are emulating and trying to in some ways beat the in-house receptionist experience. And so to give you an example, we used TalkDesk for a while. And when you look into something like TalkDesk, they promise a 99.997 uptime or whatever it is, right? And technically you will get that uptime. What will happen though is that the quality of that uptime is not what you anticipate or hope for. So, we would be on the server status, it would say green, but somehow, some way, and I stopped trying to figure out why, we would lose 10 to 15% of our calls. And we didn't realize we were losing these calls at first because we didn't even know what to look for. And so, all we would know is that there were certain clients that were like, I really felt like a call came in, and then we look at our records, it wasn't there, and we'd say, I'm sorry, I got the call didn't come in. And I didn't know the difference until we switched to a different software vendor. And at some point with a different company, I tried TalkDesk. And in that instance, we had 30 agents on there. In that instance, we were missing around 30%. They were just, gone with the wind. They evaporated. There were calls that were, if you were the caller, we would attempt to make it and nothing would happen. You would reach air. And so you can see how this would add up to be a very significant thing. And so, to give a more extreme example, in the case of Vicky Virtual, we tried to save a little bit of money. One thing that I try to say now, and I got it from one of my old mentors, is don't try to trip over dollars to save pennies, right? And that's what we did. We were looking into a new vendor that was less expensive than Five9 that we were using at the time, and it would save us roughly $5,000 to $10,000 a year at that point, maybe more. And in 2 months, we went from that provider to something called FluentStream, which ended up being a bad move. We lost literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in recurring revenue over the course of 2 months. Like 40% of our client base was, basically gone. The usage was reduced, so our revenue went down significantly there. And honestly, it almost killed the company. I don't know if it almost killed the company, but if we carried on for, say, 6 months like that, we wouldn't have existed anymore. And so the reason this happened was because this was a small team. TalkDesk has $100 million in funding or more and has a $1 billion valuation, so they have resources and engineers and whatever. This was a small team that built a similar application to TalkDesk on top of Twilio, which is, again, on Amazon Web Services. But at the end of the day, they're shared servers, and, the data traveling too far. I don't know all the details, but some of that data gets lost. Some of those data packets that get transmitted from the caller's receiver to your internet-based connection where an agent is picking up on their headset. Somewhere it gets lost. And so switching over to FluentStream, we went from losing 10 to 15% with TalkDesk to literally 50% of our calls. And our time was there, but the quality of the code wasn't as good, and, cloud-based infrastructure that's purely cloud-based isn't good. So what's the solution? What you do in this instance, is you look for different providers, such as Five9, which I commonly recommend, that actually have their own data center. Old school, and not that old school, talking 20 years ago, old school call centers, they used to cost over $100,000 to launch. And the reason for that, the main expense, was that you had to have sort of an in-house data center in that infrastructure so that the servers were right there. If the servers were not right there, then the reliability of those phone calls wasn't sufficient, especially if you had a customer service operation and a lot of agents. And so, we sort of jumped the gun a little bit in terms of going into a cloud-based solution. It's scalable, it's extremely cheap, but it doesn't match the quality. So Five9 doesn't sit on something like Twilio. It doesn't sit on AWS. It sits on, basically their own data center. And they have redundancies across the world. So, if one data center goes down because of a flood or, act of God type disaster, then that traffic will be routed somewhere else that will pick up that traffic and enable the system to continue to function so that you can continue to service your clients and receive calls. So you want to use a provider that had that type of setup. It's extremely important. I could go on forever about that, but it's extremely important. Now, outside of the reliability of the tech stack, which is the first point, the second point is making sure you have the right features for whatever you're trying to do. Again, in the virtual receptionist space, we're doing something very specific. So you want to make sure you have the right features and functionality in your provider. as well as a full understanding of how that software provider defines the term, defines the different metric, and you need to have that full understanding. Let me explain why. So if you don't have the right functionality or the functionality is not optimized for your use case, you can have different agents that may take, say, 1,000 calls at their full bandwidth per month. Now, in this space, I know that optimized agent that's doing pretty good but still somewhat average is had the capacity to handle about 1,800 calls a month. Okay. Now, say you use a system that brings that down 20%, so to 1,500. Now, this has a huge impact on your profitability. Why? If you really think about it, the largest expense in your company, unless you're extremely aggressive on marketing, is going to be your payroll. And so the more that you can essentially get out of each agent, the more profitable you're going to be. The more clients you can have and revenue you can have per agent, right, the more profitable you're going to be. So if you have an agent that can only take 1,500 calls versus someone that can take 1,800 calls, you're literally getting the same amount of payroll, but in one case, 20% more client revenue, right? So off the top, you literally have 20% more profitability. Now, per agent, you're looking at, probably $600 to $1,000 in that case. Now, if you think about the per agent cost, the least expensive system might be about $50 per month, and the most expensive system might be about $300 per month. Now, if on the absolute highest end, you can find a difference of $250, but the efficiency at just a 20% difference is around $500 to $1,000, then I think it's pretty obvious what you should do. In addition to having less bandwidth, the reasoning for that bandwidth being lower is because it's tougher to have for each agent to deal with each interaction, right? They will be drained mentally more quickly. They will stay with the company probably a shorter amount of time. They will be less enthusiastic and awesome on the phone, which will impact the satisfaction rate or level of the callers. The satisfaction level of the callers has an impact on your clients, right? And whether they stay with you. Say your clients under one scenario, based off of certain performance of the agent, say they stick with you for a year. Say the agents are a little better and doing better, performing better, and so now your client stick with you for 18 months, right? Our average was 22 months. Now you've got 50% more lifetime value out of every single client you have. So if your client's paying you $300 a month, $3,600 for a year, or $5,400 for an 18-month average. So that's $1,800 per client, right? So, you got the compound effect of not being able to have as many clients or as much revenue for each agent under your payroll. You also have the compound effect of maybe having more agent churn and maybe having more client churn. These things can add up substantially, and they're the types of things that you want to think about. Now, circling back to point 2, I'll give you an example of not understanding the right metric. Now, in my course, and I don't want to plug it too much, but in my course, one of the things that we offer as one of our bonuses is a sort of a sheet that asks very specific questions that I was not aware of that you need to have under consideration and have answered whenever you're considering a vendor, especially for a virtual receptionist company. It's absolutely important and critical that you ask these questions and during the course. But what I will say, an example, there was one company that had a certain way that they determined handle time. Now, during my sort of questioning process, I said, hey, do you guys track handle time? They said yes. Now, for me and how it is for most systems, handle time means talk time, okay, the amount of time that the call took, plus after call work. Talk time plus after call work equals handle time, right? Now, This system didn't count it that way because they couldn't track after call work properly. We sort of assumed that they did somehow, and especially since they said, oh yeah, we track handle time, and there was a handle time metric in there. But what we didn't realize, and it took us 10 months to figure this out, what we didn't realize was that it wasn't being tracked properly. And because it wasn't being tracked properly, in our business model, we charge our clients based off of the amount of handle time they use. And so the amount of handle time we would have been able to bill was about 30% higher than what we were able to track using this system that, did it differently. And so for every $10,000 a month in revenue that we were charging, we were missing out on an additional, $3,000 to $4,000. So that's a significant amount of money that we lost out on, especially over the course of 10 months, just because we didn't ask the right question and we weren't fully prepared. Okay, so make sure you understand, the functionality, the terms, and exactly what they mean for every provider. Now, the third thing I want you guys to be aware of is making sure you understand pricing, right? Now, one of the things the new software providers did get right is that the pricing is very easy to understand. But in the telecom industry, what normally exists and what has existed for a long time is taxes as well as surcharges. There's something called E911, as well as local and maybe country surcharges and stuff. And they're just additional fees. Something like TalkDesk, you might see taxes on top of, say, $150 an agent per month. Something like Five9, you're going to see every single little thing itemized. And so, when you get a quote from a different provider, you want to make sure that you have a full understanding of what the pricing is going to be, because it is a significant difference if they do tack it on separately, and they typically won't quote everything. They'll just say, oh yeah, of course that's how it is. If you're a newbie to this industry, you don't understand that there's certain things you might not know about and that a random rep might not tell you about. So make sure you get a full itemization of all the things that go into the pricing. Ask if it's all-inclusive or if it's a la carte. Some people will charge for every single minute that's used. Some will be included. Some will, charge you for agents per user, and some will charge for how many agents are logged on at the same time concurrently, right? There's all kinds of different scenarios, and you want to make sure, again, you get a very specific breakdown of what the pricing is. And the best way to figure out, what the differences are is to look into the pricing of at least 5 to 10 different vendors, even if you're not actually considering all of those vendors, just so you have an understanding of what the range is. And therefore, again, you can ask better questions when you're narrowing down the actual, let's say, final candidates. So, I hope this was helpful for you. These are 3 huge considerations. You got to make sure the pricing's there, that way you can plan. You got to make sure the reliability's there, that way you don't kill your company. And you got to make sure that you understand exactly how the vendor you're going to use work, so that you can extract as much value out of it as possible and you don't leave possibly a tremendous amount of money on the table. So if this was helpful for you, I really hope you like and subscribe. Just click the thing and do the thing. And also make sure you hit that bell as well, because I'm putting out videos here and there, and I'm also doing the weekly live question and answer, and you can be alerted about that every single time that happens. So again, really loved you watching this video. Thanks a lot for your time, and we'll see you on the next one.